This is how I like it. We just kind of hang out.
We're starting in the fetal position, which is really relevant in a way when you think about it.
Right
now.
The birth of humanity in a new format, you know?
Yeah.
The birthing process.
And that's actually a good place to start. Is one of the things that really stood out to me in the last Two Human podcast was when Mark was talking about change, and change means death, and how in our culture we're afraid to change because we're afraid of a death of maybe our old self, or a death of the way we used to do things, or a death of a concept that maybe we hold a little too dear to ourselves. And I don't know, I guess we're starting in the fetal position, so let's start with change and death, I guess.
Change is death, 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 change is death.
Doug, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, we're most of us are aware, we're looking at the death of a civilization, you know, I mean, and it's hard, it's hard to accept one's individual death, but, the death of a civilization, it like takes on a whole other thing. And it doesn't mean the death of humanity or the death of life, but, this sort of Western conquistador mentality is, it's reached its limits. That's part of what my work's been about lately is, that even the billionaire tech bro, colonialists are realizing that they're going to get hoisted on their own petard. They can't escape from the externalized harm that they've been creating for the last however couple thousand years, depending on how you look at it, or longer, that it's really over, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you want to use the fetal seal as a possibility, Terence McKenna and others before him have suggested that, the spasms that we're going through as a society, might just be the birth pains, that if you came upon a woman, delivering a baby and had no idea how babies are born, you'd think that this terrible thing was going on. There's bleeding and sweating and screaming and a giant, alien thing protruding from her belly. There's like, you would think she's about to die. So, when you look at our civilization doing what it's doing, and climate change and mass migrations and race wars and all the stuff that we see going on, you'd think, maybe this is the end, but maybe it's the end of something and the beginning of something else.
The human species is undergoing radical change. The corporations and the government has ended up sowing the seeds of its own demise.
Change is death, 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 change is death.
The death of the conquistador mindset, but this Western mindset of not connecting it to the holistic mindset of whether the indigenous or East, and bringing that into the fold of like systems thinking and thinking things in cycles. So things die and decay only to give life to new seeds of thoughts, and it builds on the thoughts beforehand. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk to you, because these things, these ideas that you have been dealing with, and
so all that stuff, but that doesn't say who I really am. That doesn't say who we really are. We can hope, but there's a way to bring a little bit of hope back into what we're doing. It does seem stronger, but the original strain of cyberpunk ethos, those who see in technology and media a way to express rather than repress human creativity, we're still here. Economic and social collapse just make us all the more real and present as we all have to look for alternative ways and paths to express ourselves. You can use YouTube and become something way better than some, Justin Bieber awful celebrity. You can use it to actually create work that makes us interrogate ourselves. I mean, there are a lot of people who are looking at these technologies today, especially in the failure of the digital economy. And it's a failure, the digital economy. In the wake of the failure, they're looking at these things. They're looking at that failure as fertilizer for these new ideas. Who reify what it means to be human by looking for ways to express and implement a civic reality of shared responsibility, economic equality, and universal human flourishing. We can do this.
That in its failure, we are looking at it as fertilizer for these new ideas. And when you go back to, I think, some of the better metaphors to look at life and to look at, even when you analyze yourself, is everything degrade and die off to give birth to like new life, fertilizer.
Right. Like the mycelium.
Yeah. And there's a period of where things digress and break down only to give energy and renewal to the new dawn and stuff like that. And that's just how things work,
That it starts out open-minded and crazy and this, and then ends up getting kind of hijacked by one group or hijacked by another. And, and we always then go talk about those good old days and how do you maintain it's like with your favorite band, when they were a garage band playing in your local bar. And then by the time they get on MTV and are at stadiums, it's like, oh, this isn't what it really is. These people don't know. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, a few bands hung on to it. The Grateful Dead, by hook or by crook. I guess by refusing to get better, on a certain level. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's what I like. David Bowie kind of, in that sense, like keeps on transforming himself, and so moving his thing forward in a sense that, like, as an artist is really something to look at, like whoa, he like achieved this like great, like every so transforming himself and keeping like relevant and even keeping to like evolving his sound.
And it's interesting. But you could look at him versus, say, Madonna, who did the same thing. I feel like with Bowie doing it, I feel like he was almost killing the last incarnation in order to have a new one, as opposed to, I always felt like Madonna, it was a bit more of a commercial thing of like, okay, I've used up this one. I better come up with, something else to titillate them, like some kind of extended strip tease. And what Bowie was doing was much more like what, Genesis Peorage talks about, that you've got to, once you recognize yourself, you got to kill yourself to then move, you got to change your name and move on and move to the next one, and get reborn, keep getting reborn, which is it's a personal way of going back to this sort of, this sphere of annihilation we were talking about at the beginning, that as an individual, you keep practicing dying, you practice ego death, and then you get reborn as something else. And that, I think people who've done that again and again and again are more comfortable with the idea of their society or their civilization dying and transforming into something else.
Well, as navigator of this venture, I try as much as possible to set out in a direction that in the first place is practically impossible to achieve, and then along the way mess up the minds of the crew with as many chemicals as we can lay our hands on.
DNA is an alien virus. DNA is an alien virus. DNA is an alien virus that it turned previously immortal creatures into separate genders, limited by death. Limited by death. Cut and paste pictures, music, and culture and gender, but they could cut and paste life and death, break the illusion of the other side altogether, liberate from the tyranny of DNA,